be either way. I did just start recording, but I can stop if that's easier for you.
Nope, that works for me. That's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay, we're all set. I see the red light.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. I just have a few slides I wanted to go over to touch on a topic that we were talking about last time. Last time we had considered potential topics, and one of the ones that was brought up was Section 508 as it relates to collection development. And so that really seemed like quite an interesting thing to review and to see what policies were out there, what other libraries are doing, and just kind of where the general, state of practice is currently. And so I did a little bit of research and some digging and just to see, and from the American Library Association, they have identified 4 categories for disability types. And they talk about visual, hearing, motor, cognitive, kind of the disability types that I'm sure we're familiar with as we address Section 508 with our reports and things. Also, some other documents that had come out in 2009, and then later, the American Library Association issued a resolution saying all libraries purchasing, procuring, and contracting for electronic resources and services require vendors to certify that they comply with Section 508 guidelines. So, as a library is building out their collection, what materials need to comply with Section 508? What vendors are they dealing with that are securing and ensuring 508 on their end and adding to that library's repository? And from the current state of things, it looks like consideration for the needs of people with disabilities is the exception rather than the rule. And a lot of libraries actually aren't considering Section 508 when they are making collection decisions. So I went through some of the literature and thought up a few questions that we might ask and consider as a group to see where we are with Section 508 and our collection development, and also a few slides on like best practices and how to test out your items to see if they meet Section 508 requirements. So 5 basic questions here, like are your digital resources compatible with screen readers and assistive technology? Is your website navigable by keyboard alone? And on this point, I think in a previous meeting, we had discussed how to navigate with a keyboard. You can't use a mouse. Like if someone is just using a touch keyboard and is cycling through using the arrow keys or the tab keys, are they able to access every element on your site within your collection? And does the navigation flow in a logical manner? Think like when you do a PDF and you have to check the reading order. The same thing applies for your websites and where your collections are housed as well. And going back to what the ALA recommended, do the vendors you acquire digital resources from guarantee Section 508 compliance? How often do you audit your website and digital collections? And also, do you get feedback from users with disabilities? I feel like that's one area. I mean, I can speak for ourselves that we're fairly weak in. We really don't have a lot of folks that we can do outreach to see, hey, does this meet your needs? Does this meet your requirements? So before we proceed, I'd like to maybe take 1 or 2 of these talking points and throw it back out to anyone else. Do any of these questions ring true with your organization? Are there areas you need to focus on or things you're already considering based on some of these initial questions?
Michael, I'll start out.
Okay, thanks.
We're lax in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now, keep in mind, I don't have a library, so I send everybody out to other people's libraries. But as far as our website, that's something I'm working with our civil rights division on right now to make sure that, our website is 508 compliant. And there's a lot of, well, we don't have any employees that are visually impaired. Well, that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's a lot we can do here, but ours is all dealing with the website because we don't have digitization here at YDOT. I'm a library here at YDOT.
Well, so our website, this is Amanda from the Oregon Department of Transportation librarian. I can confirm that our website is at least there are efforts for the ODOT, in general, the ODOT websites to be compliant. However, this has reminded me I need to check the catalog section of the website, because I know that where it's located, the website is okay, but the cataloging itself and whether you can tab through or use the keyboard alone is definitely something this has reminded me to check.
That's awesome. Good to hear from you, Amanda, by the way. Welcome. And are you and Enid together?
Yes.
We're partying, Michael.
You guys have all the fun stuff up there.
Yeah, no, she's traveling cross country and needed a break, and Wyoming is the best place to take a break. So if you ever need, you guys are welcome to the YDOT facilities. We'll put you up in a room, so just, come visit us.
Very hospitable.
That's fantastic.
The other thing, Michael, that I don't see it on here, but libraries a lot of times offer software and hardware for individuals to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering how many have, when they purchase the software and when they purchase the hardware, are they making those 508 compliant?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw that question out.
That is a great question. I know with a lot of I think the only thing we use at the other ODOT, Oklahoma DOT, we have logins for people to access AASHTO, purchases from the AASHTO library and things like that. And you have to download some proprietary software and security stuff to access those PDFs and things. To my knowledge, I believe it's accessible, but I need to revisit that. But that's a great question. To Enid's point, does anyone else do anything like that? Loaning out software, anything third party that people have to use through your site, or any hardware related issues? Oh, subscriptions. Yeah, Dawn just posted. Yeah, that's a great point too. And I think that also kind of goes back to discussion on vendors. Like when you're getting a subscription service from a vendor, do they have a Section 508 statement? And do you check for 508 with your vendors? And also, we'll get into this later on, but maybe do you have a policy on Section 508, that covers vendors? Another good point from Don, library cataloging software, is that Section 508 compliant? Does your policy cover any of these issues? Do you know if your subscriptions and software is 508 compliant, or is that something that you'll need to audit and check on your own? Has anyone done anything like that? Has anyone reviewed their software to see, or is this like totally new? Like for me, it is kind of new for me. Like I haven't really done that on ours. I bet we should though.
Don, this is Enid, and I have a question. You're with FHWA. Most of the software, hardware, whatever that is purchased normally has some federal dollars in there. Are there requirements for software and hardware other than Section 508 that FHWA has that requires us to make sure that our software, our hardware, our subscriptions that are coming into our libraries, our catalogs, all that kind of stuff? I know that you've got a new Section 508 page for FHWA and new requirements, but how in depth does FHWA go? Do you know? I hate to put you in the spot.
I don't know, because I'm not the actual 508 officer, but I do know that when we purchase something, it's like going down the rabbit hole, and I don't know how much. So I do know that they do have some requirements for 508 for some of the products for states, I think, but I don't know how far that goes, because I do know that there are some exemptions as well for states. So that would be something that we would have to probably go back into either our legal office or someone else that knows more about that legislation than I do. I do know though, consider this for the subscriptions. There are thousands of subscriptions, and it's not only the platform, but what about that PDF file that someone downloads? That to me Because like I'm sitting here going, oh my God, how in the heck would we be able to actually even track that from our perspective, even if let's just say the platform is 508 compliant? What about every PDF on there? Because I know that for our website, we have to test everything and everything goes through a 508 review before we post any kind of PDF files online, for example. So I'm like it is a big job. You could probably keep a whole bevy full of librarians and 508 staff totally booked for years just checking on subscription PDF files.
Well, in ASHTO, I'm the gatekeeper for the ASHTO reports that come out. And we can purchase 5 PDF, digital reports that can be used by 5 different people. And there's no way for me to know if those reports are 508 compliant. We're hoping that ASHTO on the back end is making sure that they're compliant before they put them out for all the DOTs to get, because each DOT gets 5 copies of them, and then they get 5 hard copies.
However, if the PDF itself is compliant, then we don't have to worry so much about, would we have to worry as much about the report?
I don't know that I've never, that's something, it's a really good point. I have never checked those PDFs. When they come through, I throw them into a database, and then all of our different engineers can go in and grab them up. It might be material standards, signs, whatever, the different standards that come out that ASHTO puts out every year. And like I said, they give us 5 digitized copies, and then we have a password, and then anyone can just go in. 5 people can look at them at a time. If a 6th person wants to look at it, they have to wait till one of the 5 get off. But yeah, it's I don't know about ASHTO. Of course, there's nobody on here from ASHTO, but these are great questions. What are librarians going to do?
Maybe that's something we can follow up with ASHTO. I'm sure we can talk to someone and see if they have an answer to that, because who is liable for that at the end of the day? If someone, for example, from a disability advocacy group, downloads a PDF and they come back to you and say this isn't accessible, does it fall on you, or do you go back to ASHTO for remediation? Like, who would bear the liability for that?
Michael, I cannot give you legal advice, but
That's fair. That's fair.
whoever is offering the product is the one that's liable.
Mm.
So you, as the librarian, if you're not making sure that your catalog, everything in whatever, is 508 compliant, and someone comes to you and they can't access a report, a document, whatever, they will file a complaint against the library, not the vendor that sent it to you. Now, the vendor could also be in trouble. Like I said, I'm not giving you legal advice, so please, for gosh sakes, do not take this as legal advice, but that's what will happen.
That makes sense. And if you'd like us to redact any portion of this, we can do some video editing, but yeah.
You don't have to redact it. I made my disclaimer.
Okay. We have on our website just a simple disclaimer, like we make every effort to ensure that all of our content is 508 compliant. And if you see anything that isn't, let the librarian know, and we'll make every effort to provide to either remediate that or provide a similar type of content. So, we haven't had any issues in the years I've been here, but you never know. With more regulations and rules about this coming down the road, it only makes sense that people would have more scrutiny about it. So this is, I think, a very timely topic.
Michael, that's a good way to circumvent the whole issue, is what you did with that disclaimer. So that's a good way to do it.
I can actually, let me bring it up on the screen really quickly here. Let's see here where we have that. Okay, hopefully everyone can see our library website here. If you go to about and then our collection development policy, scrolling down, we have a statement on accessibility, which kind of says just that. And if anyone needs to borrow, poach, or steal any of this, please feel free. I can include this as a link, afterwards, but kind of just encapsulating what I mentioned. If an element does not meet legal requirements, you can contact us and we'll make reasonable accommodation. So hopefully that's got us covered. We'll see. We haven't had any issues yet, but all right. Moving along. Let's see. Oh yeah, thank you, Lamar. I'll post a link there really quick here. All right. Right. There we go. Link is in the chat. Thank you, Lamara. All right. So I've also found a few suggestions from the ALA and from other sources as well on improving accessibility in the collection. Oh, excellent. Don posted they have a policy as well. That's great. Actually, before we get into that, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring that up to share with the group. FHWA is committed to make ICT accessible. Excellent. Yeah, this looks really good. Actually, we may steal some of this for ours as well. This is great. Thank you, Don. Okay, great. We got some good links going on here. That's great.
Public domain.
That's good to know. I think if everyone kind of shares what they have, that's how we get stronger. So this is fantastic. So moving on to like suggestions for improving accessibility and collection development. First and foremost was developing a collection development policy, which includes accessibility. I don't know how many people have a collection development policy or one that includes accessibility. For the longest time, we did not have a collection development policy until maybe about 2020 or 2021, thereabouts, a few years after I came on. And, we've been discovering more things to add. And so the experts are recommending to add accessibility in that collection development policy if you do not have one. And also in the selection process, going back to vendors, where you're getting your items from, be they ASHTO, be they from, third-party software, or anything like that, journal subscriptions. If you have a vendor that you're paying money for, see if accessibility is a part of what they do, and if they ensure their items are 508 compliant. Also providing feedback to vendors about why a product got selected or not. I think this is vital to let them know that this is an important issue. And the more people that may get rejected if they don't have a 508 policy, it may force them to come to the table and start implementing more of those policies in their overall suite of software and offerings. So let's see, adding accessibility requirement to licensing agreements, collaborating with assistive technology within your organization. And I think that is really key, especially if you're based out of a university or even a DOT. There would have to be a local, accessibility group within your organization or agency that can help you with this, to help obtain assessments of product accessibility and usability, or even to help conduct audits of your own platform. So I know our university has its own accessibility group, and so does our DOT as well. So hopefully at your own agency, you can leverage your own resources. I mean, I'm sure they'd be happy to help if you came up to them and be like, hey, could you evaluate our website or our catalog or make sure this is accessible? They may be willing to work with you. So that's always viable. Also consider a rating system to help determine appropriate decision making regarding accessibility of resources. For example, what are you willing to tolerate when selecting an item? What if they have alt text in their PDFs, but maybe they don't have proper reading order? Or what if their tables are not accessible, but everything else is? Do you weight things more heavily than others? Is it a blanket no if one thing is misaligned? Like, having a rating system and justifying that system, I think would help send a clear signal and hopefully make things more efficient when you're selecting items to include in your collection. And lastly, take a look at other libraries' collection development policies. That's what I did last week, kind of preparing for this to see what other university libraries, what other DOT libraries, are there collection development policies publicly posted and available? Do they have accessibility sections? And you can kind of craft something of your own based on those policies. Again, why reinvent the wheel when you can go around searching and seeing for others who have done it better? And usually the best cases are the ones who have suffered from lawsuits due to accessibility challenges. I think it was Purdue University that had a big accessibility case in the 2000s where they had to pay out quite a bit of sum to disability advocacy groups and had to redo a whole bunch of their websites. And you can bet their accessibility statements are now ironclad because they don't want to go through that again. So maybe just do a quick search of see who's been sued, and go from there and see who's made those remediation efforts. And oh, fantastic. Dawn is posting National Industries for the Blind has testing services for web pages. That is very helpful. I think I'll probably send mine off to them soon. So yeah, these are great resources. Thank you. Moving on, here are official recommendations from the American Library Association. I'm not going to go through point by point, but again, just kind of re-encapsulating, you got to make sure your vendors are accessible. You have to make sure you have your own testing protocols. And also, you need to have libraries some funding for purchasing resources and services that comply with accessibility standards. So I hate to throw out the F word, funding for libraries, but some money may need to be allocated to ensure that the collection is 508 compliant. So I figured I would take one item from the accessibility testing, namely the keyboard. If it's keyboard accessible, is your library homepage, is your catalog keyboard accessible? And there are several handy tips on how to see if that's possible. So as far as seeing, if it is accessible, the metrics included are, can you access all the features with the keyboard? Can you operate all the controls? And is it easy to tell where you are on the page using just a keyboard and without a mouse? And then it lists common keystrokes used in web browsers, tabbing to move to the next element, shift and tab to move backwards, enter to activate a button, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and do a test of our library catalog, or rather our library homepage. We can move on to the catalog next to see if you can navigate and get around with just a keyboard alone and no mouse. And generally they say tab to go through each of the items, but I'm hitting tab right now. You might be able to see in the very bottom left corner of your screen, there's a little URL that says about, and then I hit tab again and it says it's moving on to the next section in sequence. But that may not be very helpful because it's not showing me visually where I am on the website. So it'll be dependent on your browser, but I'm using Microsoft Edge. And if you go down to settings, you can click on settings, and there's an accessibility setting in Edge that you can click on. And the one we want to select is show a high visibility outline around the area of focus on the page. Most web browsers should have this feature, so we're going to turn that on. And now we're going to go back to the transportation library. Let me refresh. And then when we do tab, now you're going to see the area being highlighted that is selected. So you'll be able to quickly see, what is going in sequence, if it is in the right sequence. And so far, it looks like our library, some elements actually may be out of sequence. It's going through links, clickable links, our map, different buttons you can click on. So let's just go ahead and see if you can click a button. So I'm on the online catalog. We're going to select enter, and that takes us to our online catalog. Now here's the real test. Is our online catalog keyboard accessible? Hitting tab. It looks like it's taking us through the different areas. So, all right, it actually looks like it missed something, actually. It may not be going in the proper sequential order. It missed some of the heading up above. But overall, I'd say not terrible, not too bad. Again, I may send this off to Dawn's resource to see, how this measures up. But all in all, it's not the worst. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a second and get out of that. So I know that's kind of a little bit of a whirlwind tour of keyboard accessibility, but hopefully that is at least a little bit useful for some folks. So having that focus indicator to be able to tell where you are on the page. Lastly, hopefully everyone can see the resources screen. Here's a list of resources that we kind of found related to this topic from the ALA, from different articles, covering accessibility for collection development. Also, National Library Service collection building policy. That was pretty helpful in how to make sure your policy complies. And before we get into our last item, I want to mention Michael Nugent had shared a very helpful document creating Section 508 conformant PDFs. If we have enough time, we'll go ahead and go through that document. But before we do, I'd like to throw it back to our participants and see, you know, any thoughts about this, how this may change your collection development policy, some tests you may decide to do on your own website to see if it measures up to 508, or if there's any current practice you do to make sure your collection development policies are 508 compliant. For example, does anyone conduct an audit of their resources, or does anyone check their vendors to see if anything is 508 compliant?
Hi, Michael. This is Amanda again.
Yeah, hey, Amanda.
You just checked it for me because I also use EOS Web for our catalog in. So that was very helpful because that was the first thing I was going to do when we got out of here. But I think that's really good to know. The only other thing I found is an ADA 5 compliance website that will test it for you. But that's ADA, not specific to 508, although they're very similar. But this is very helpful. Thank you for the tidbits and the resources. I think this is going to help me. I'd already planned as the new ODOT librarian to go in and kind of do an audit of the cataloging of the website and of all the things. And so this definitely adds more context of what I'm going to be auditing.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. Let me know how it goes too, because we'll probably do the same thing. And in my opinion, us ODOT librarians need to stick together. So that sounds good. All right, anyone else, anything else anyone does for accessibility relative to their collection development? Or maybe not, maybe this is something brand new and you hadn't considered this before. I mean, I was in the same boat, so yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Hi, yeah, a part of our what we do to keep our website up to date and accessible is that because we're part of a university, the university at large has a pretty strict policy on accessibility, and they run scanners through all of their websites, and the scanners put out pretty nice reports, and I use those reports to make sure that the website itself remains accessible down to every level, and look for ways to improve the whole experience. Part of the accessibility too isn't just, screen clickable and stuff like that, but people who have vision impairment, like color blindness, that's a really big one. Making sure that you have a good contrast between text and background to make sure that it's legible. I know that I have a problem sometimes with poorly designed sites who think that they're too cool for school. And the old way, of course, was to do white text on black background, which could become pretty unreadable pretty quickly, or text that was very close to the background color. And people who have visual impairments that include color blindness have a real problem with that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jeffrey. Honestly, you really spoke well to the capability of being at a university and partnering with the university for accessibility services. The bevy of resources that we can access at a university campus is just unreal, and oftentimes people just don't know about it. So reach out within your own organization, see what resources you have, if you're just starting out this 508 journey, for sure.
Often too, if you're coupled with part of the government, like we have DIR, I forgot what it stands for exactly, but the Department of Information Resources, I think. And they also scan any website that's associated with government work. And since we're associated with TxDOT, we get scanned by them. Now, they don't give us a report, but it is nice to know that we could get information from them if we needed it. So I'm sure that other groups that don't work with a university, certainly that you work with the government in some level, and you might have an equivalent to DIR that you could reach out to for help scanning your site and getting other accessibility tools from them.
You bring up a great point, and I noticed Don posted in the chat. I'll get to the chat in a second, but I wonder if this might be a helpful resource to add to the NTL LibGuide on Section 508, but like potential resources for scanning your website, or third parties or other groups that can help evaluate whether you're remediating or whether you're deficient. If that might be like just a list of resources to help contact to help you through your own Section 508 journey. If that might be something applicable to the LibGuide, I don't know, Rosalind, do you think that might be worth pursuing, adding those resources and groups you can contact, or if that might be outside the scope?
Yeah, sure, we can add that. No problem.
Okay, great. Yeah, then Jeffrey, I may get in touch with you, and thank you, Dawn, for posting that link as well. We can just start adding websites of, hey, you want this checked out to see if it's compliant? Then here you go. So that'd be cool. All right, and
Yeah,
back
there's
to
also a few free ones too that are out there that aren't associated with either the government or, uh, a university that you can just apply to your site. Now I think most of them will only apply one page at a time, or they'll crawl through your site and you get a report. And I don't know. Well, I'll have to look for those again. I used to use them, but not in a while. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're fine. We like free, so that's perfect. Okay, yeah, Don posted. I don't think National Industries for the Blind is free, and I think that kind of goes back to the point of funding. Like agencies and organizations need to allocate funding to help test for this kind of thing. So, but I know funding is a pretty dicey issue these days. So if we can find some free resources, that'll be good as well. And Don, you posted, does anyone else do accessibility for printed materials? Great question, because we're always so used to in the online world of Section 508. So yeah, I'll throw it out to the group. Does anyone do that for printed materials? As we wait for a response, Dawn, can you speak to that a little bit? Not to put you on the spot. Does FHWA do anything for that, or is that something that your organization is looking into?
No, I think that it probably falls back on if someone comes in that is having accessibility problems, we would probably end up doing something like either scanning it to electronic, if they're interested in a specific document, probably scanning to electronic format or reading it aloud or something like that. I don't think that we can't make everything 508 compliant because of the cost. But if something is needed, we'd probably try and find some way of getting it to them in accessible format. I was just wondering if anybody else is doing anything like that.
Sure. I wonder if that would apply to like Braille copies of certain items for visually impaired individuals, or how that would be carried out. Well, it sounds like a potential topic that's kind of ripe for discovering, since no one may have a policy on that just yet. So again, I think a lot of this points back to our own collection development policies and see, do they need to be adjusted? How does it address Section 508 or accessibility in general? What needs to be updated? What are the latest things that we need to include? So yeah, these are great questions.
Hi, Michael. Just a little note. We were talking about Braille and all of that, and I do remember one of my favorite things in library school was touring 10 different federal libraries in DC, and one of those was the National Library Services for the Blind and Print Disabled. So I am wondering if, and I'm looking at the website now, but I'm wondering if they might have some contributions or some ways to help or advise and how we can make our libraries more like Rowan site compliant.
That's a great suggestion. What was the library name again?
National Library Service, or the current name, because I'm looking at it, is the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. It's under the Library of Congress, NLS, under Library of Congress. They have a lot of services and resources for blind and vision impaired.
Excellent. Thank you. We can include that as one of the links, especially as we expand the 508 Lib guide. That's great. All right. I guess we do have a few minutes left. I'd like to move on if there are no further questions or discussion points anyone would like to bring up. Michael Nugent from Texas kindly shared a great resource on creating Section 508 PDFs. Let me go ahead and bring that up and share the screen here so we can take a look at that. And it is hosted on Rosa P, free and accessible for everyone. Oh, and thank you, Beth, for posting that link to the NLS. That's fantastic. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that screen. So creating Section 508 conformant PDFs, 65-page document. Yeah, Michael, I took a look at this before the meeting and it was pretty robust. Like it seemed to touch on a lot of issues, tagging, fonts, views, descriptions, tools. Like it's had quite a lot of material in it. Tagging order, headings, all the things that give us headaches. So this was kind of nice to go through and be like, oh, okay, there is a step-by-step on how to do this for PDFs. Michael, I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts or anything you wanted to point to specifically on this, or just be happy to kind of go through it.
Sure. I know that this thing first came out in January of 2021, and then it was updated in June of 2024. And it was only because I was checking recent additions to NTL, thank you very much, that I was aware it had been updated. I was telling a coworker that I wish I had actually done a much more close reading of this document before yesterday. I do find it interesting that if, Michael, you move all the way to page 47, which is 53 out of 65.
Yeah. There we go. This one?
And if you looky there, that is a technical work documentation page.
Uh-huh.
Now scroll up just one page, please. Other way.
Oh.
Okay. See how it says at regular tables? And then if you move down just a scooch, layout tables. The technical report documentation page is an example of a layout table. And many of us already know that when it's converted from Word to PDF, Adobe will oftentimes say that there are errors with respect to the technical report documentation page because it views it as a table. And then if you go down to the next page, its suggestion is you basically rip apart the tag structure and you make it so that it's just a series of paragraphs. So if you notice, it's presenting the same information, but it's no longer being viewed as a table. And you can go through it line by line. And if you notice, it's report number, and it's followed by the actual report number, the government accession number. And you can take it apart such that the exact same information is being presented, and then you can control the reading order as you move through this document. You can start in box 1, move to box 2, box 3, box 4, etc. And I know that this is something we have talked about in the past, and it's technical report documentation pages can sometimes they're just not very cooperative. But this is a potential solution. You just have to detablify, which is now a word. You have to detablify it.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, no, yeah. And this is
This is-
something I've already discovered to do this, but to see it in this authoritative document made me feel a little bit better about myself.
Hi, this is Enid.
Yeah, go ahead, Enid.
There was a lot of conversation regarding this document at the ASHTO RAC meeting. And the FHWA is working on that document at this point in time. And they're doing some changes. Don, I don't know if you have any updates on that or not. But we were advised to not mess with the technical report page. And Don, I don't know if that has changed.
No, the technical report documentation page is part of the USDOT's for anything that's any research that's funded. We're supposed to have that report documentation page, but that document that Mike was talking about and showing as far as 508 compliance, that is what Federal Highway Administration put out to try and make sure that whatever it is that we're using can be made 508 accessible. And in addition to that, we are working on the CRG, but that's not going to be ready for another, I don't know how long. It has to go through so many hands that it's probably going to be at least a year or two before it's out again. But that CRG is actually going to refer back to the 508 compliance website, which is www.fh or highways.dot.gov/ I think it's 508 dash section 508, something like that. I can put the link inside of the chat area, but that is really what we've been advised to do, is to say, yep, you have to follow 508 compliance. Here's the link that has the most recent and up-to-date information on how to make your products 508 compliant.
Yeah, we were just advised, we asked about that, if we could mess with the table. And they said, no, don't do that. That the new table would be coming out, I don't know when. But I know that there's been a lot of work being done on the table because they're going to be redoing the table, is what I understand.
Yeah, that was done through the Office of the Secretary. So the National Transportation Library, which is working that through the process, but just like us, it takes a while when you get into any government agency to go through the processes, especially with that one, because they're getting rid of one of their orders and then they're going to say, now use this table, and they'll have to give it out to everybody, and then everybody's going to have to put it into their instructions to everybody. So it will take a while for that process to happen. I do know that it's being worked right now, but it's kind of being worked in the background. But that section 508, that Federal Highway section 508 can help you to make that 508 compliant. That section, and I think I put the link earlier. Give me a sec.
And I would like to point out that the table is visually identical. It's just the tag structure that's different.
Mm-hmm.
So we could do what Michael did and fix the tagging structure, and that would be okay with you guys at FHWA?
Yeah, as long as the tagging structure, as long as you create the 508 compliance until USDOT changes the entire, they're going to give us a new table eventually that we're going to use. And I did ask Mr. Gantz, whether or not he would give us also a Microsoft Word. They're going to do an online version of this 508 compliance, but we actually at Federal Highway include the compliance, that little 1707 form, the report documentation page. We actually include that in all of our reports because of also people using that for cataloging purposes. So we actually include that in anyways. And he said that he was going to give us a Microsoft Word rendition of that so that we can continue to include that in our reports. When they get ready to do the electronic version for uploading stuff into Rosa P, we're also going to have a Word version that we can use in our reports as well.
Thank you for that update, Don, because like I said, this was a hot topic and there was a lot of conflicting information that went back and forth.
Yeah, it's going to take, how it is. It takes a while for any government agency to get it through all of the different processes and approvals and reviews and stuff. It just takes a while.
Well,
it's still working through the back door though.
I can't wait to see the changes to the CRG. From what I understand, it's going to really be nice.
Yeah, we're going to have some changes in there. We're going to add things like, presentations and things like that. And we're going to have examples of things like color contrast. Like, how do you do a color contrast? How do you, what that means? So it'll be interesting.
Michael, there's one more thing I'd like to, if you could share the document from FHWA. There's one other thing I'd like to point out.
Going back to tables. Where were we?
This next part is going to be, it's going to be on page 52, which is page 58 out of 65.
Okay, can everybody see it okay?
And if you scroll down just a little bit, I want you to focus here on if an equation or symbol is text and the proper Unicode was not used. The symbols can sometimes not get carried over and they'll get replaced with something that just looks like gibberish. And Michael, I know that you and I have had conversations just between us about some of the biggest problems I've had with documents are character encoding issues.
Mm-hmm.
A researcher will use the appropriate Cambria math text to create a perfectly valid equation. And then when that goes through the conversion process to PDF, something just gets lost or broken. And if you keep going through the document, they actually give you something that I've never considered before. And they have some instructions here about what you can do or what you can try if something doesn't get translated through. As I said, I read this on Tuesday. I have not had the chance to put this into operation or to try it. But if you keep going, it says to correct an issue, yada, yada. And then if you keep going, it says to place the content in a span tag. I never would have thought about that in my entire life. Because apparently what you can do is once you have all of this stuff in a span tag, then you can just go in and write what it is. This blew my mind.
Huh. So would that be the same thing as like if you had changed an equation to a figure, for example, and wrote a alt text description?
They talk about that a little bit in this. So this is about a 4-page section when they're talking about equations. And they mentioned that. They said that if somebody inserted an equation as a figure, just make sure that it makes sense within the reading order.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that I have experienced many times that Adobe, when it's looking at reading order, it will put figures at the bottom of the page no matter what. And you can just grab that tag and you can move it up in the tag tree so that it falls within its appropriate spot. And it's suggesting to do the same thing with this span tag. You put the offending character tags, if you will, in the span tag, and then I guess you can add alt text to it.
Would it treat the equation as a whole, or would it would you do a span for each individual part of the equation?
That is a great question, because I can remember in one instance I had an equation for which the opening and closing parentheses didn't make it through the conversion process. And it was only those two parts of the equation that got messed up. The next time something like this pops up with respect to one of these reports that I get from a research supervisor, if there's a character encoding issue, I am going to attempt to fix it with span. And if I'm able to do that successfully, that will be a banner day for me.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, let us know how that goes. I'm very curious. I'll wait for us to get a document too from our folks and see if we can try something similar. This is intriguing.
Right.
Huh. I never would have thought.
I'm gonna jump in here too and say, if you all run into any really huge issues, the author of this document is Michelle Cribbs, who's our 508 officer at Federal Highway Administration. And she is very willing to chat with someone that's having problems with it. Just say, you know, we're having problems with this at our state. You know, can you help? You know, and she might be able to talk with you and maybe walk you through whatever the process is that you're having a problem with. She's very good with that. Just give her, you know, send her a quick email. Do you have her email address?
I do not.
Right, I'll pop it in here. She's really great to work with.
Very much appreciate that.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Well, on that note, I do want, and we got a few minutes left. I did want to bring up one other thing. So the Pooled Fund Study is putting together a Section 508 training webinar, a series of 2 webinars. The first is going to be September 17th, and the second is going to be October 22nd. The dates and times are here on this flyer, and it's going to be free for anyone who's interested or wants to know about Section 508. This is going to be in partnership with the consulting firm who's been working with the Pooled Fund, CTC and Associates. So they'll be handling the webinar, and they'll be looking at making Microsoft Word and PDF documents Section 508 compliant. And then the second session is going to cover tips for success, summaries from the last section, and questions submitted by users. You know, their thorniest Section 508 issues, they're going to have a live Q&A for that. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple of registration links in the window. Hopefully everyone can access those. So yes, please, we encourage everyone to come, your research managers, people in your office, PIs, anyone who does Section 508. We'd love to have them attend this free webinar. And if you can't make it, it's going to be recorded and we'll send it out to anyone who would like a copy of the video. So just wanted to get that out there real quick. Oh, and thank you, Don, for posting Michelle's email. That's perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, I know we just have 4 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions or any thorny Section 508 issues they'd like to bring up? If not, I'm going to go ahead and give you your 4 minutes of life back. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. And Beth and I will confer and figure out when we're going to be doing the next one. It should be in October sometime, I think. And if you have topics you would like us to consider for review for our next webinar, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email. Even if you feel like you're the only one that has this problem, chances are you don't. So let us know and we'll be happy to talk about it as a group together. So thanks again, everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.